This is a series where we share our practice from Förnyelselabbet at Svid, being in the field of systemic design and innovation, but also where we meet up with our friends and peers from this field that we are inspired by, that we sometimes collaborate with or want to collaborate even further with. And we are fortunate today to have our peers from Census with us, and also Impro Consulting, John Mortimer, who's our keynote speaker this morning. My name is Pia Mäkelinen. I'm the manager of a unit at the Swedish Industrial Design Foundation, working on creating collaboration and innovation in public sector. And Förnyelselabbet is a concept that we have developed since 2016, trying to help ourselves facilitate within this field, but also helping collaboration and innovation with a systemic mindset actually take place in different organizations and between different organizations. We are, and I am super interested in who you are and where you're actually, where you're at this morning. So I also want to invite you into the chat because the chat is going to be your place for asking questions during the seminar. So please write in the chat, where are you this morning? What geographical place do you actually take this in from? And why are you interested in these new approaches to enabling welfare services? So why is that an important topic for you? What is it that you're especially interested in? Please write that in the chat. And I'm also interested if English is your first language, and important for us to actually speak English throughout the seminar, which we plan to do, but if it's really important, then please note that in the chat as well. Joel, I want to just invite you first of all, Joel, who is Joel Weborg from Census. Could you just say a few words on what Census as an organization is and do?
Yes. So we're Census Studieförbund. It's a Swedish Swedish NGO. So we're working with, there's no good English word for this, but folkbildning. So we're going to stick with that. And we're interested in this field because we're looking at what is our role in the sustainable future as a NGO and working with folkbildning. So we're exploring individual, organizational, systemic transformation in this. So
I think it's also whatever building is in English. I'm also struggling, but I'm thinking learning has to do with it. So yes. It's another word for learning. But and one of the things that we have, I think, as our key in all of our labs has to do with the learning, how to build infrastructure for learning, how to create learning within the practice that these people that they do every day. So how can we actually create possibilities to learn? And therefore it's even more interesting to be collaborating with you, Joel, and Jenny, who's going to talk a little bit further on today. And lovely to see that a few of you are starting to also check in through the chat. Please use that in the next minutes when I'm now going to invite John Mortimer into this morning seminar. You're somebody that we're very inspired by. You've been in this field for a long time, and your reflections and thoughts on what is really missing within the public sector in order to transform and do all that radical change that is really needed in today's society is going to be super interesting to take in this morning. Very happy to have you here. Very sorry that it's early for you in the UK, but please introduce yourself and invite us into your thoughts and reflections on this topic.
Thank you very much, Pia, and everybody. Good morning. It's great to meet you all. And to introduce myself, I have been working with systems thinking, complexity, to help to transform local government services in the UK. I've been doing it for about 20 years. And I think I have probably worked with every local government service there is here in the UK. I have done a little bit of work in central government as well and with policy. So in terms of the actual work I do is that I work directly with them to redesign their services and work with senior leaders to change the organization from the way that they're working into a new way of working. And I think the reason I'm here is not because I'm anything different about me, but I've got that experience. And in the UK, we've gone through all sorts of interesting initiatives that gladly you haven't. But maybe what we can do is we can share and learn what we have learned from those initiatives within the public sector in the UK, because here we are also trying to improve what we do. And we don't seem to be doing that terribly well. So you should just be seeing a screen. You shouldn't be seeing my notes. So this is what we're here for, and I'll probably be about 20, 25 minutes. And where I'm starting from is before my time. In the 1980s, the public sector in the UK was particularly messy. It was uncontrolled. People didn't know how it worked. They didn't know where it was going. So they came up with a great way forward where they would be able to manage costs and they would be able to see how they would be in control. And that was called New Public Management. And it was something that expanded to many countries in the 1980s. And the characteristics of those were the economies of scale, which basically means the larger, the better, the larger, the cheaper, the more effective. That we standardize things, because standardized things can be replicated and they could be managed in the same way. Everything is logical. So a government service is step by step and it follows a process. There is central control and national reporting. So all the numbers from local authorities can go directly to the center and people can look and see what the performance is. The front office was optimized. It was separated from the back office, and you had a lot of call centers that were created. And the variety of demand that was coming in was reduced and standardized, and that reduces cost. And one of the characteristics of the call centers, we employed lots of people to answer the telephones, and they were trained to answer the questions so that it allowed the back office to get on with their work. And the way that services were designed is that they were designed individually. You got a lot of demand coming into an organization, and the service is designed to reduce that variety of demand into a standard service and come up with a way of dealing with all demands using the same contact center. So in this case, for instance, there are two standard processes that deal with all the types of variety of demand. This is easier to manage. And so as a manager, you would have a dashboard in front of you that would have all the metrics that you would need. These metrics would go to central government. And the way that a manager would manage is through departmental targets and budgets. That was their primary mechanism of control. They didn't need to know about the work. They didn't need to know what was going on in the detail. They just needed to look at the figures. more recently, in one of the initiatives, they thought that, hey, what we need to do is we need to become a digital organization. And this is taken from exactly the wording that came out from the government. The best service organizations deliver online, everything that can be delivered online. This cuts their cost dramatically and allows access to information and services at times and in ways convenient to the users rather than the providers. And I think actually Sweden in the private sector is very advanced in this. We are very familiar with this today. Okay, so this is where it's come from, this kind of great idea that digital is going to save us. And what happens about this is that this has created a new discipline called service design, which is very popular in this country and is making great inroads. The key principle of digital is based on one assumption, which is that our behavior is logical and predictable, and it's based on new public management. What we've found is that digital does work in certain situations, but in local government, what you very often have is you have situations with citizens and families that are complex, they're irrational, they're unpredictable, especially when they're in need of help. They don't follow the simple logical sequence. They don't wish to engage with digital at that point. They want to speak to a human being. So this is one of the examples of one of the biggest projects that we've seen. It started in 2012. The idea was that the unemployment benefits, the housing benefits, the childcare benefits, these were all things that this was all money that was given to citizens when they were in need, that they would be grouped together in one system called Universal Credit. And this would be administered using a digital system. And several times, this almost failed. It has been into difficulty for many years, and the costs that were associated with it have increased dramatically, and no one really knows if the savings have been realized by making this digital design, but it has had a huge impact on the country, which I will go into in a minute. The other wonderful thing we did is something called austerity, which was the response to the financial crisis about 15 years ago. And a report came out where the impact of austerity created extra 330,000 deaths. Those were mainly to do with ill health, reduced income, poor nutrition, and housing, and social isolation. So these were not directly, they were indirect. Universal credit is the primary cause of local government housing problems. So when you go into a housing service in local government, universal credit is the #1 cause of the problems. And these are the things that have been created over the last 15, 20 years that now we're beginning to see everywhere. So what's important to note here is that the development of a government service will have an impact into the future. It's not just the current measures that are used at the time. What we've realized since the 1980s is that new public management does not work. It is fundamentally flawed. It people have not been helped. Communities fragment. Demand increases. So we have had increasing demand now for quite some years, and we've had an increase in costs. Changing this isn't so easy. And the work that I do is about creating prototypes, creating new ways of working. And sometimes those are difficult to sustain because the existing system is still there, imposing its effects on local services. And one of the most important points that we have learned is that the leadership and the overall system has to adapt to the new ways of working. It's not just a case of taking a service and changing it. It's the foundation principles that need to be looked at. So what we've found is that we tend to like to create services that categorize people, that create personas, that look at different types. And actually, what you find is that the public sector should be less about delivering individual services. And it's not actually just about supporting citizens. It should be about creating the conditions for the citizens to thrive on their own. This is about dealing with individuals. It's about understanding and dealing with complexity, not logical. So this is an example, a very simple example where you've got the paying of bills. So this is paying of rent to government housing or local tax. So the purpose of this service could be to make the experience as smooth as possible, to reduce the cost of interacting with you. What might we do? We might design the interactions so that the interactions work well. And when you look at the number of people that pay their bills, you find that 94, 95% of people pay their bills, and a very small percentage don't pay their bills. But when you look at the resources that are used by local government, the resources that are used for paying are very small. The resources that are used for dealing with non-payment are far greater. So we have to also look at the service not just by volume of demand, but by amount of time and effort and work that we put into this, because that gives us an indication as to where we need to put our focus. And of course, what happens, I don't know, similar to other countries, we send out letters first saying you have to pay. Ultimately, we will threaten you with having having some of the items in your house taken away and possibly losing your house. So what we did in one particular local government recently is we had this small percentage of people that were not paying. And we just looked at the database and we said, let's identify somebody. They're not the worst. They're not the ones that never pay. They try and pay. They've been trying for maybe 2 years. Sometimes they manage to pay everything. Sometimes they go into more debt. So we picked this person. And what we did is we sent 2 people to go and visit them. Not to talk to them about their rent, just to visit them and to find out what it was like to be them. So on the first visit, we told them we were just going to look at their property because it was social housing. And what did we find? We found that it was a 1-bedroom flat. It wasn't in bad condition. There was mold on the walls and it was very messy. One thing we did notice that this toilet was very dirty. It was dark, it was stuffy, no windows were open. So when you went in there, you could feel this sort of heavy air. There was a woman of 46 years old living there together with a man of 36 and a child 2 years old. The man plays computer games all day. He has behavioral issues, so he doesn't work. And the man uses the child's room to play the computer games. Angela is the woman. She had no car. She has no car. She is isolated socially. The child never goes out. We find that the child is sleeping in the parents' room. Very few toys, no books. The child didn't seem to be very interested in seeing us when we were there, but didn't really have much else to do. The man's benefits had been cancelled. He had no idea why, and they didn't understand what they had to do to get those, to find out why the benefits had stopped. Angela was a carer, so that was her job. She used to go out and work as a carer. We then went to visit again. So we said, can we come and visit again? And they said yes. When we visited, we took some books for the child, and we said that we would come and help them understand about their benefit situation and see if we could help them get their benefits. So that was the reason why we wanted to visit the second time. What did we learn the second time? We learned that although we said we were coming, they'd forgotten. The man was stoned on weed. We talked more to Angela, and she said that she cares for her child. She also cares for the man that's in the property. She cooks, she cleans. She was actually worried that we would tell social care about the child and perhaps the child would be taken away. That's what she said about the first visit. She was suspicious of us. The man's benefits, the reason he hadn't got benefits is because we hadn't updated the universal credit system. It's a computer system. They don't get letters. It's all on the system. If you don't access the system, you don't know what's going on. We then decided to visit again. And on visit number 3, what did we learn? We learned that she had hurt her arm, and because she was on something called 0 hours contract, when she stops work, she doesn't get paid anything. She admitted to a lack of food. When we went into the kitchen and into the refrigerator, there was very little food. So she had to give up her job. She also admitted to us that they had multiple debts with electricity, gas, all of the other companies that she was dealing with. To get benefits, we discovered that they needed a medical test. So they needed to go to the doctor to get a medical examination. We told them this and we helped them to organize it. The child, they were trying to get a nursery place for the child so that the child would have some interaction. We also found out that the child's development was slow, had a heart condition. Angela said they would very much like to move from where they are. And the reason for that is that their family was around them. And actually, she doesn't like the family to be around them, her extended family, because all they do is they ask her for help and she just gets pulled into so many directions. She's living day to day and she broke down in tears, completely exhausted. She couldn't cope anymore. Now, this was all to do with not being able to pay local rent. All of these other things were invisible to us, and they hadn't been, those would not be things that we would have picked up when we engaged with her. Now, interestingly enough, when she does go to visit local government, she goes to one service and the one service asks her the questions that they need. They don't get this level of understanding. And actually, if you added up all the different people that knew something about Angela and her family, you would find out that actually we would all know different bits, but we would not have that knowledge altogether because of this call centers, the digital standardization. So the question is, oh, I forgot, we visited the 4th time. And the 4th time, as soon as we opened the door, this is what she told us, that she was pregnant. So can you see that over time, her life has been getting more difficult? And it's not that she can't, she's not able to cope. She's not able to cope at this moment in time with everything that's happening all at the same time. She's desperately trying to make things easier. And what we discovered when we looked at more people that were not able to pay their rent on time is that many people had a whole group of issues like this. And I'm not saying that you wouldn't know about these things in your work. You would. I suppose what I'm trying to demonstrate is that the way that currently government services is designed is that they don't understand and they don't get that knowledge, and then they can't help. They would help individually. The different services would connect with Angela and her family in different ways, with different rules, and it would be totally confusing for everybody. So what we've learned about demands and services after all these years of doing this kind of work and helping local government to design themselves so they can cope with Angela and her family is that some services are simple and transactional, like reordering a passport or a driving license. Some are simple, but there's high variation that goes into those services. Some services you need expertise, like planning or environmental health. Some services are complex. And complex services are those services that deal with people, their needs, their families, and all the different aspects that we've just seen here as an example. The issue is that perhaps by far most of the resource in government goes towards the fourth type of demand. Yet we're not designing in this country the services that deal with that kind of demand. And the question that we have, of course, is which ones of these should be online? Some of them can be online, some of them shouldn't be online. So just wrapping up really, what have we learned? And this isn't just, of course, a small group. There's actually many people like me that have been trying to do these new prototype ways of working. And these are the types of things that we've found, is that primarily we need to look at knowledge, not data. Data doesn't help us. What data would we have about Angela and her family? The data would not give us in any way a picture of her needs and how that can be changed. So we need to be human. And individual services that are standardized, it's very difficult for them to be human. You have to talk to another person. We have to understand and design for complexity, not fixed rules. Fixed rules stop us from understanding and doing the work that we need to do. We need to be adaptable, we need to be flexible, and we need to be local. This isn't about central control. This is about understanding the situation in a locality with a family. One family that is in debt will have different characteristics to another family that's in debt, and we can't deal with them in the same way. The way that we see government services, it's that it's dynamic. So if you look at Angela and her family, they need different people perhaps to help. They need different types of help. It's not static. She then became pregnant. So over time, the situation changes. So public services have to be designed to integrate and work together, not distinctly. And that is a key piece of learning that we're unable to absorb that at the moment in the UK. We try and do that sometimes by opening an office where we have the different people within the services working together in the same room, and that helps. This is about engaging with citizens and engaging with families and making decisions around that person and around that family. And we find that technology is an enabler, not the driving force for the design of a service. And very lastly, and it's one that's hidden, but it comes out in the long term, the key to public services is prevention. It's not about dealing with problems. It's about working with people early so that the problems do not exist or get fixed early on. And this is the thing that's missing in this country, is that the prevention services were the things that were discarded as soon as austerity started. So austerity means that local government in the last 15 years has had up to 40 to 50% of their budgets cut. And what happened? Did they get more efficient? Did they improve their services? A little bit of that, but then the first thing they did was to stop their prevention work. And that has caused an increase in demand, and it has caused services to fail because we just can't cope. So this will be in the handout that you will see, and that you will get, sorry, from us. And thank you very much. That's me finished. And I'll be ready for any questions or any further help if anyone has anything.
Thank you so much, John. This was super interesting, and I think it gives us a mirroring from what you talk about in really the last 15 years in the UK and the financial crisis. And I'm also thinking that we're just at the very start of a new financial crisis. We're in such a difficult situation, and there's a lot of fear in me that we will maybe walk in your shoes instead of trying to do something else when this crisis hits us. The way, for those of you who might have joined us late, we are talking about how to design new forms of welfare services, and John has just given us an really interesting presentation on this. I'm thinking what you bring out is that if we want to design new forms of welfare services, we should really look into the human aspects, the context, the situation in which these welfare services is going to land. And if we don't understand and realize the dynamics of those systems, we will forever fail the people that we're trying to help. Or, as you were saying, create the conditions, better conditions for. But you're also bringing some, I'm going to bring in Elin and Jenny with your, whatever resonated with you from your perspective, being in these situations, facilitating these similar processes. But John, just one question from me, because you were saying this is really difficult in our country. And you were also mentioning that this is much easier to manage. It's easy to manage the easy processes, and it's easy to find what is it that can create better conditions for managers to actually deep dive into another approach, a more systemic approach. What do you think from your perspective in the UK?
That's probably the greatest challenge. And what I have to do is I have to help those leaders not to remain in their offices, but to bring them down and to experience like the case study that I just went through. Mm. And then we go back and we sit in their office and we talk about that case study. And they realize many things from just observing that. So we can talk about all the things that we've just raised about digital, about standardization, etc. And it confuses them because they've expected government services to be working one way, and suddenly they see something that doesn't fit. And the tendency is to try and make that situation fit the current design. And what I have to help them to see is what I ask them to do is to just run a prototype of a different way of working, and let's learn from that. I don't suggest that they suddenly change everything, I think this is about us slowly learning what works and what doesn't work. So it's about moving to an experiment, to a trial, where we can actually touch and feel and see the difference. This isn't about making big changes at the beginning. I don't think anyone is prepared for that here. And I don't know if people know what to do differently then. The small experiment would help, where people can go and see it and they can start to see what works and what doesn't work and learn from that.
And I'm also thinking, John, in that kind of approach, where it's a humble kind of approach, where we also acknowledge that this is something, what we need is something else than new public management. We need, that is something that needs to be built, something that needs to be learned, and we can learn very well then from experience. So trying, testing new ways out could actually help build that new muscle memory in both managers and maybe in the different labs or contexts that we're in. Jenny and Elin, if you were to, any reflections that you have on what John has just said, anything that resonates particularly with you?
Yeah, thank you, John, immensely for bringing up that case. I stumble upon the ability, or perhaps the lack of ability, that the current systems are doing for us in order to listen. The ability to listen to different perspectives, and the ability to reflect. As far as I understand your case, I see traces of that ability, lack of abilities perhaps, that we aren't encouraged really to really listen. What are your thoughts on the listening as an ability, and how to practice that as within these systems?
Yeah, it's a very interesting and important question, because when I do this with people who work in local government, they are not used to listening. They're used to applying a set of rules to what is in front of them. So I have to help them leave their documents in the car, go and not make any decisions, and their only purpose is to go and listen. And in the example that we had, each visit that we made, we learned new things. So what we then talk about is what needs to be present to be able to listen. And the first thing that has to happen is there must be trust. And you don't just make trust happen. Trust has to be developed. That's why we needed so many visits, because there was mistrust. You don't need to have 3 or 4 visits. It's just that that's how we started. So this is about a human being connecting to another human being without all the things that they come with them from the organization. So I think that's my primary answer to you, Elin. And that's something that has to be developed, because we're not used to doing that.
That's very powerful, and something that I think, Jenny, both us in Förnyelselabbet, Elin is our senior designer in Förnyelselabbet. I'm sorry, Elin, not to present you as you were starting to talk. Jenny, you're responsible for Hållbart Helsingborg, but what was it that resonated with you in what John was saying?
Yeah, so first of all, John, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I mean, especially the final slide with what we have learned, it was for me just some kind of like copy paste on that one. Very like key aspects that I could really like sign off of all of them. But something that I was really like, how you mentioned something about like how difficult it is to sustain these like prototypes where you test something new, but still in this system that we are still working in. And that is also something that I'm really like, I can really recognize that from the kind of work that I'm doing. And also how to sustain these prototypes where you're testing new things, and then also how to bridge, how to actually try to make them a part of the
Mm.
system, so to speak, the dominant system. That was something that I'm sitting here thinking about. But this, just the also the 4 types of services that you mentioned, because sometimes, I mean, I can sometimes go to this kind of having a tendency, oh, I'm working with complex societal issues, and then I tend to put that on everything to actually, okay, we have 4 different types of problems, so to speak. So we should use the method and the way of solving issues to really see, because sometimes it's easy to have some kind of like, oh, I'm working with these complex societal challenges, to also like narrow it down. So it's really good to have that kind of like, reminder.
Have you seen, John, that is helpful for managers, for example, to sort of see that they don't have to adapt this kind of thinking and doing in all the things that they are responsible for?
Well, it's funny because like we've done here, just by if I'm sitting with the manager and I've only got 30 minutes, it's not that difficult to show them an example. And then I go, yeah, but that service was different to what I did in this service. And then they go, oh, really? And then they ask, and I go, yeah, I've realized actually there are probably 4 different types. And I just show them that. And that type of learning can happen immediately. That type of insight is not difficult. It is simple. No one has just ever done that with them. And they go, well, of course, that's so obvious. Why have I thought they're all the same? Why have I applied the same rules to all of them in the same way? It's like something is uncovered of their eyes. And the same thing with talking about complexity. And I've never come across a public sector manager who's ever never even come across the concept of complexity, and that it's different. You design a complex service very different to a logical service. They're both different, and you apply different design methods to each one. And then, of course you do. It's like, so actually, although in many ways we're saying this is difficult and whatever, a lot of these concepts are not difficult. They're actually quite straightforward. They just need the context, and they need the right approach, not in a classroom situation, but in a more real situation for people to learn about in the same way that we're doing today.
That's lovely. We have a question from Ulrika, and she says, according to you, what is the best way, John, to go from a bigger, maybe national challenge to a more actionable, to be able to act and not be paralyzed by the big and zoomed out picture? What would you say?
Yeah, we have that. Everything here that government tries to do with initiatives seems to be, let's do national initiatives. And of course, the majority of them are what they think will work, but they have no real idea. The only way that I've seen is you start off with small experiments, local experiments, and you use them to learn what works, and some things won't work. And you go there, you visit, people from central government visit those locations. So very quickly, you're probably aware of the Buurtzorg model in the Netherlands, which is about care, very successful, many thousands of people working in that new way of working. It actually happened because a government minister decided to visit their office when they were very small, when they were doing 3 experiments. They decided to spend a whole day there. In the morning, they were taken around. In the afternoon, they were shown the concepts and theories. And it was that moment that the government minister realized that she had to go back and make this work, because she had understood it fundamentally. So that, I think, I've seen that work, and I've seen the national initiatives not work. No one is prepared for them. No one knows what to do with the national initiatives.
But it's also very interesting the way you nearly to put yourself or marinate yourself within the context, within the situation, in order to understand how. I think there's a dialogue then between the national, maybe even the way you were saying, creating conditions for people is maybe what national government needs to think more about. So how can we learn about what is actually needed? What are the contexts that these new policies, where is it that they are going to work, and what is needed for them to actually deliver value there? So interesting with that dialogue. We have another question about trust before we move on, and I let Jenny and Elin say a few things about the initiatives that we are now working on in Helsingborg. But there's a question here from Jenny, and she says, trust is vital. Can we make a systems design to build trust? What's your take on that, John?
Yes, and actually it's surprisingly easy. I put a post on LinkedIn the other day from someone else where they said the power of a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. What we have in government and local government very often is that someone comes in to the office, they have an appointment at 10:30, they come and see someone, they sit down, the person behind the counter has the power. They have the rules, they have the power to say yes or no. The person that's come to see them is anxious, doesn't know what the right thing to say is, so sometimes they lie, they don't say everything. That's the situation that we have in England at the moment. That doesn't build trust. Trust is a human being listening to another human being. So the person gets out from the desk and comes and sits with them at the table and perhaps gives them a cup of coffee and says something that asks them about how they are, something that's not related to why they've come in. And the key thing is that people, we all know how to do this, but we very often don't do it at work. We are just a human being, one human being talking to another. And it can take just a moment and a minute for that to happen. And as soon as that happens, you watch the reaction of the person that's come in and what happens to them and how they change. And that is something which I think is probably the most fundamental thing that I see when I'm doing this work. And it still moves me because that is the fundamental change that happens at the beginning to make everything else work. And it doesn't cost anything. You don't have any technology to do that. You don't need to train people. You just need to help people do that, because they do that when they're at home and when they're in their home situation. So it's a case of just allowing that to happen. So yeah, that is probably the number one thing that has to occur.
And I think that this is there's so much here, I think, for Jenny and Elin, just to dive into it. I'm feeling often talking about how to nearly relearn. We have all these, as you're saying, we have these abilities in our own very private, complex lives. So maybe getting more of it into our daily life as a civil servant, maybe being able to be that more human person in our jobs. Jenny, if you were to say a few things about Hållbart Helsingborg and the initiative that you're working on, just invite us into the wonders of Hållbart Helsingborg.
So Hållbart Helsingborg, Sustainable Helsingborg has during the past 3 years explored different working methods and structures to deal with complex societal challenges, or wicked problems, as they're also called. So the work has been based on the hypothesis that we need a context that can bridge organizations, sectors, and cultures in order to innovate and create better conditions for working with these challenges, complex challenges that kind of no single organization or a sector can solve on their own. So mainly we've done this by creating different activities together with the aim of, strengthening our capacity to collaborate and to learn what actually works and what doesn't work in relation to wicked problems. So we've also tried an organization and a culture for the shared work, based on questions, such as how do we organize ourselves and how do we work together, and what is the culture that we're creating together, speaking of trust as well, and maybe even what culture is required to manage these different logics that arise when working cross-sectoral. And we see that innovation is about crossing industries and sectors in order to find new solutions, so where different perspectives can meet. So our aim has been to establish a place in the what you may call like the organizational or sectoral gap, where both individuals and organizations can build capacity and learn more about how to tackle some of these societal challenges. So what we to say a few words on what we wanted to explore. So we kind of created a context where we that contained the framework for what we wanted to explore, how to do it together, and who could be involved. So then we kind of ended up with 4 strategic areas that we have been focusing on. So we wanted to generate knowledge together across organizational and sectoral boundaries. That was like the first one. And then secondly, we saw the need to create these sustainable relationships and strategic ways of working together. And third, we wanted to strengthen and build capacity with these new ways of thinking. And fourth and finally, to facilitate and have these open workshops where we could actually test thoughts, ideas, and actions together. So just briefly, a few words on where we are now, because now we have been doing this kind of exploratory work. So now we've kind of seen a need to analyze and conceptualize several of these insights that we have gathered along the way. So this is also the phase that we're currently in. So that's briefly about Hållbart Helsingborg, Sustainable Helsingborg, I guess.
That's very good. Thank you, Jenny. And there's so much of this being in that sort of middle ground of where different perspectives meet, and actually seeing that as the powerful start of any transformative innovation or radical innovation. Very similar to how we work in Förnyelselabbet, and we have a Förnyelselab now in Helsingborg. And just give us a few
words on that.
What are we doing?
Yeah, for sure. Me and Jenny is actually part of the same lab group, as we call it, in Helsingborg. And we're working on a systemic learning process there together with the social care service for foster care, for kids who for some reason need to live in a different situation apart from their parents, briefly. And of course, it's a very painful service to deal with, both for all the perspectives, and a lot of pain for the children. So this lab process has its purpose to understand or try to explore ways of meeting the needs of the children in better ways. And what we do then is to create a lab group with different perspectives. So we have people who have experience of being in foster care. We have foster care families who take on children who need a space to continue their lives on. And we have people with holding the perspective of the parents, of course, people working in the social care, and also, for instance, Jenny, and different perspectives meeting these different children, parents, and foster care families. Trying to understand what are the dynamics of the systems. So not only talking about the services, but what are the dynamics of the system that the services lives in? What are the mental models that creates a certain the consequences of how the system behaves, basically. So this what I think we're doing is letting this lab group meet each other and listening to the different perspectives, and in that process also try to find ways of exploring the individual action space, and the action spaces that we hold together. This lab group meets once in a month, but we also meet the full familjehemsenheten. What would that be in English?
The unit, or the family unit, or the
In
people,
the-
all people working
in the
that.
social care service, right? So we're not, it's not exclusive for the lab group. We're trying to look on how we can scale the learning while we're trying to understand the dynamics. And I'm exploring, I'm hoping that this approach can invite a different milieu, a different
Like an environment or feeling.
or how we can move on and explore our action spaces in the full scale. Like, so for instance, we're training on listening, basically. I think that's what we're doing. And when we understand our mental models, and we've seen some few mental models here that are definitely restraining the dynamics of the between the parents, the children, and social care and the foster families. Understanding those dynamics, we hope, can give some kind of shared understanding that what if I listen differently? What if I try to understand this system differently, with a different way of listening to the different perspectives. So what we're in now is scaling between the lab group and the full unit, and now we're about to explore or experiment more in the micro action spaces together with meso and macro spaces, but focusing now on the micro spaces.
And Elin, I'm
Briefly.
thinking if you would, very briefly, and please, I mean, if you're interested now, John has just put up his LinkedIn page so that we all can connect. Elin and Jenny are here. You can ask questions and connect. But just to sum up this very brief hour, I'm thinking on the theme of trust, the way that John was talking about it, the way Jenny and Elin that you're talking about these two initiatives in Helsingborg, how is a more systemic approach helping building trust the way you see it? Elin, if you were to say something on that.
Well, so I think it expands our way to understand the context that I am in, and to be able to relate to a system. I think it empower us, and as far as I've seen, when people try to stretch their action spaces, it comes a feeling that they have power to change from a small scale. And the potential effects that we've seen in those small action spaces are immense if they are allowed to explore the spaces. And getting an experience of that will most likely, in my opinion, make people continue explore and understand their action spaces. So an embodied experience to me on what listening basically can do in what kind of changes it allows for is very powerful to me. My understanding.
And Jenny, what do you think? Just like a short sentence before we finish.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the trust within the organization, to have some kind of environment, to create an environment where it's okay to test and sometimes actually fail, to see this as a journey of learnings also, to not just focus on the end game, so to speak, the end result, but to also see what have we done during this process, look at everything that we have learned, to also kind of build that trust within the organization, and to be curious. So I'm also thinking about that when I'm hearing trust.
And and I think that is so important. If we're now also on the fringe, we're sort of exploring new ways of working with these really messy challenges that we have. Bringing back from those tests results and feelings of this was actually valuable. So bringing that kind of trust into these kind of processes, I think, Jenny, that's really important and powerful. I want to thank John, Elin, and Jenny for taking part and giving your different practices or let them come alive this morning. We are here if you want to connect, and Joel has just asked a question in the chat of any other issues or themes that you think would be valuable for you to take part of in a similar seminar. Maybe we should expand it to a 3-hour seminar, because I think these things are in need of getting even deeper. But having a 1-hour seminar just to taste and get some of this practice across, that's what we aim to do with these breakfast seminars. So thank you all for joining us this morning. Hope to see you soon. We have more seminars coming up, but do write in the chat if there's anything in particular that you would be interested in listening into. Thanks all for joining us this morning, and goodbye.